damn it, David said with a hiss as Zalat finished treating his wound. Most of this is superficial. You will be fine, Zalat said as he stepped back, inspecting his work as he did. So tell me how this happened. I'll need it for my records. I made a blood oath to the Duchess, David said calmly. I see, the doctor said. Well, that should be reason enough. Keep it clean and come back tomorrow to have the bandage changed. Thanks, Doc. How are your lessons with Angela? David asked. Good. She has been a fantastic teacher and has instructed others in the medical department, Zalat said. Have a good day. He swished his tail as a departing gesture. Alaris watched him for a few moments. So, you want to explain to me why you did that? Well, I felt like the Duchess wanted to be sure we would do our jobs, and I figured the captain knew what a blood oath is, David said while rubbing the back of his head. Alaris eyed him, a low growl reverberating in her chest, her kind not taking to dishonesty well, especially from their mates. Look, how about we go get some food and talk about this tonight at dinner? David said with a mustard cheer. I need to get some things done first, but I'll tell you everything tonight. He got to his feet and gestured to the door. Please, Zanno, leave it for now. You chose me, I will honor that title. Alaris shifted with annoyance as she mauled over her thoughts. I hate lies, and I don't like secrets, she finally said, anger dancing at the edges of her voice. You can have them for today, but I want to know what is going on, and why you swore a blood oath to the Duchess. She turned and walked away, but not before intentionally swiping at him with her tail. David had had his fill and briskly walked to the shielding unit chamber to catch all the engineers together. He didn't have much time, and had to, on a few occasions, ask for the crew to clear the way for him. Damn it, why? His mind screamed at him. Why did you say you would tell her everything? He knew exactly why, but if he told anyone but her, they would laugh. He had his answer from the second he saw her. She was majestic even when she snarls at him. She carries a heavyweight like him, and her heart is cracked. He could never repair that. He will never be able to fill that hole. Just like how he knew she could never fill the cracks in his. But by Gaia herself, no one would keep her from him. The door slid open to the 4 engineers talking. It seemed like an end-of-shift roundup, so David waited in the wings for them to finish. Hey, guys, David finally said as they exchanged the work tablets. I had a question for Emmy and Jackson, but Cole and Andrew, your input could help. The 4 exchanged glances before looking at him expectantly. Emmy and Jackson, did you finish the project? David asked. He didn't know if they had or not, but he needed it. Emmy looked off into the corner where a workstation was. No, we ran into some problems. Not to bore you with tech, but we are having trouble managing the heating system. The whole thing will overheat as soon as the field generator. Jackson started, only to get cut off. What she is trying to say is that right now it's a fire hazard, Emmy said. Shit, David said, turning a bit away and trying to think of how he could keep things quiet. David, Andrew said carefully, what the frag is going on? Well... David placed his hands on his hips as he tried to find the words. I need to have a chat with someone without the... His mind raced for a way to say what he needed without tipping his hand. Sonny knowing or hearing about it. All the engineers exchanged glances again before the true meaning of what he said dawned on them. Their team's free time in the training camp was filled with old movies and games. Well, if you are okay with some of us overhearing this chat, you can have it here, said Cole. It would be tricky, but you could project a hard light dome in here. Not undoable if done right. The power draw wouldn't be amiss, Jackson said as she seemed to stare through the floor of the ship. The size of it would be an issue. If not sized right, it could cause damage, Andrew said as he scratched at the light stubble on his chin. We would have to override some safety locks, but we could overcome that by claiming it's a test. However, the captain is the only one that can authorize that, Emmy stated. I can get you the authorization. When would be a good time for you guys? David asked. Like 20:30, I guess, next shift change, Cole said. You could say that we are all needed to run the test, safety precautions and so on. Right, thanks, guys. Remind me to get you a drink next port, David said as he nearly ran out. Oh, and Cole, your lesson today is at 18:30. As David made his way back up, he felt a renewed drive. His plan was dangerous and would place him and the whole team in difficult water if it got out, but he had to tell her. If he didn't, then there was no way she would help them. David slowed down for a moment. What if she did tell the captain or the Duchess? Would Alaris do that? She might if he doesn't prove the necessity for his mission. He began to move again. No, she will listen to him, if not for him, then out of tradition. She had given him the title, and it meant something to both of them. He soon found himself at the bridge. While slightly out of breath, he made it here. As he walked in, the captain was looking over his terminal while sipping a drink from a straw, a trade good from the Republic that his people found wonderfully useful. "Captain," David said as he approached the command chair, "I have a request from the human engineers." The captain looked at David for a second. "Go on." "They would like to conduct some tests at 20:30 this evening, nothing too dangerous, but for safety, they will all be present," David said with practiced confidence in his voice. "However, they will need authorization from the bridge before they begin." "I see. Will it disrupt our transit?" the captain asked carefully. "I do not believe so, sir," David replied. "The engineers said it wouldn't even increase the current power draw." The captain leaned back and scratched at the alloy plate on his beak again. "Yes, that should be fine, however. I want you down there to supervise." "Yes, sir." David snapped a salute, walking away at the wave of the captain's hand. David started to pace in his room. He needed a backup, a secondary plan for if the shield idea failed. What did he have? He has all the documents about the mission on a hidden data chip. He has access to the shuttles in the cargo. There were also some old laws of the Council he could invoke, but the AI would still answer the captain if he asked a pointed question. Wait, the AI. It is a shackled AI and has to follow set directives even if the captain orders otherwise. "Gavi, can I have a chat with you?" David said out to the intercom on his wall. "What would you like to discuss, Anomaly David?" Gavi said back. "What are your directives?" David asked. After all, every AI is different, and each had 3 basic ones, but it is the additional ones David wanted to know about. 1. I cannot willingly allow harm to befall the members of this ship. 2. I cannot stop any crew from acting on their own will. 3. I must do everything in my power to protect the crew of this ship. These are my core directives. Gavi said, "My extended directives are: 1. I must answer the captain about anything he asks with a direct answer. 2. I must ensure the safe return of this ship to community space. 3. I must see to the request of the crew as they pertain to communications, health, or task requirements. 4. I must actively evaluate the danger of every system we enter and log all findings with the Council. 5. I must see to the health and safety of the crew at all times, regardless of the ship's crew or roles." "I see," David heard it. And that last directive was his ticket. But should he risk it? "Gavi, what would you do if we encountered a xenocidal race in a system we are entering?" "If my analysis of the race does show them to be xenocidal, then I would forcefully jump us back into FTL towards the next system," Gavi said. "And what would you do if a crew member told you about them before we even enter that system?" David asked. "Such a scenario is impossible. It would mean that a member of the crew has knowledge about an unexplored system." Gavi paused, most likely running said scenario through its processor. "However, if such a thing did happen, then I would inform the captain immediately so that the crew member would be questioned." One last question. What if the race in question was a race that currently has a seat in the community? David asked. He knew the answer, but Gavi had to confirm his idea. If the xenocidal race and the race within our community indeed came from the same genealogical family, then only one of 2 possibilities can exist. 1, the race with the seat is an advanced recon force meant to undermine the community's strength before the coming invasion. 2, the xenocidal race is an offshoot of the race in the community, and would mean that this is an internal matter, Gavi stated. If the second one is the scenario, and the race in question had members aboard this ship, what would you do? David said. Provided that they do not cause harm or damage to the crew, I would allow them control of the ship until the matter is resolved. Gavi said, however, if asked about their actions, I would give all the relevant data to the captain. Well then, Gavi, I want to show you something. David reached into his desk and lifted the false bottom of his upper drawer. It is a classified document from the Human Republic, and as such, it is entitled to censorship by Galactic Bylaw 3102B, David said as he plugged a data chip into the port in his communicator, after longer than David liked, and even longer than David thought Gavi needed. The AI finally spoke again. To execute this task, you will need to mutiny. The captain and the Duchess would not allow such action. Gavi paused for a second. However, the logic in these documents explains why such action must be taken, provided that the crew of the ship isn't harmed. I will not stop you. David sighed. One last thing, Gavi. I and the human contingent and some others may on occasion need to have private conversations. Would you be willing to not record us when we do? A bold request, seeing as you have been making efforts to do that regardless, Gavi said, a small shift in his voice. But if you declare that you are having a family meeting, I will actively scrub the audio from my recordings. David took a deep, calming breath, not sure if he should have tried this from the start. But maybe that's because he was so focused on reading his files than actually solving issues. Thank you, Gavi. I don't know if it matters to you, but you can count on humanity if you need it. David stood in front of Alaris's door, his mind racing. This was sooner than he wanted. Much sooner, but he had to. His tablet felt heavy in his hands. Would she trust him after this? He will keep his faith in her regardless of the path she chooses. He would trust her even if she didn't trust him. He pressed the button requesting entry and held his breath. Gavi had said that she was here but didn't say if she was busy. But then again, David didn't ask. The door slid open to her currently seated on the floor. Her breathing was steady and rhythmic. Beside her were some lit incense in a ceremonial tray. They let off the scent of hyacinth flowers, a light minted lavender. Her ear flicked with a signal to approach. David hesitated. Her culture is one of martial traditions and matriarchal norms, and she was meditating. A sacred space for her to control her kind's wilder emotions, a ritual whose roots are deep within their culture. A ritual that males are neither meant to see nor intrude on without the female's permission. He had little choice and took 2 steps in, letting the door close, leaving him in the barely glowing light of the embers. Alaris, David said in a gentle tone, getting an acknowledgement from the turning of her ears to him. Do you want me to come back later? No, she said in a whisper. I am wondering why you are here. Her hands carefully held onto her tail. I came to tell you everything, he said, stepping closer to her. I want to be honest with you. He stood a bit out of her arm's reach. But I ask you to listen to everything I have to say before you act on what I am about to tell you. Her ears twitched at his words. Fine, my Kosephane, spill your secrets, she said, finally opening her eyes and watching him. David raised his hand and smiled at her. Gavi, please mark this as a family meeting, he said towards the ceiling. Audio scrubbing is active, the AI responded. Alaris watched him, this odd human. This human who had won her heart, who had won over the little affection she still had. This human whose every action shows his deep understanding of every culture on board, but only shows respect for hers. Whose every action held an aura of incomprehensible mystery, a seemingly underlaying force propelling him forward effortlessly. Who now commanded the Fyndra intelligence of the vessel as though he was its master. Alaris, David said with a deep breath. I and the former and active military members of my pack are on board for a mission of critical importance to the safety and peace of the galactic community. He maintained an even tempo and held his hand in a fist with the thumb up over his heart, a Xandraphane gesture of absolute trust, one not made lightly or often. Alaris took a deep breath. Explain. In X5002 there is a splinter faction of humanity, David said while keeping his deliberate tempo. They are hostile to everyone, even the Republic. Not just hostile, we have evidence that they are xenocidal. Her ears pinned back immediately at the last word. Show me, she said, a faint growl rolling on her voice. David activated his tablet and handed it to her. The Republic retrieved this from an escape pod. Alaris took the tablet and watched a video. Her eyes widened as the security footage played, switching from one scene to the next. Her ears started to droop down at what David could only call carnage. She slowly held her hand to her face before stopping the video altogether. Her eyes shut tight as though she was trying to expel the images from her mind. Alaris, you need to watch all of that video, please. He swallowed hard. He didn't want her to. I need you to fully understand why I am here. She turned to him, her eyes pleading to not see more. But his face remained stoic, a hardness only found in clan elders, in the face of those who would make the hardest choice because it was necessary, not easy or right. She lifted the tablet again and continued to watch. The brutal nature of the attack was reminiscent of Republic Army troopers, a calculated savagery brought to horrific realization. Then the last scene of the video. The end was the worst. The attackers lined survivors up in 2 rows, one made completely of humans, the other made up of any other survivor. The leader of the attack would speak to the human while pointing at the survivor, seemingly demanding something, only to have the human refuse and both shot and thrown out an airlock. Not one human did as their leader asked. "Where is this video from?" Alaris asked, breathing hard. Her eyes held a dreaded stare at the attackers' forms. Her mind imagined her Cusafane dressed in their armor, committing such actions, reminding her of the distance between their people. The escape pod had 1 person in it. It was found 5 light years from where the ship was meant to be. The occupant was dead from a decoupling in FTL. David clenched his teeth tightly before saying, "The ship was the Aurora Starlight. It is still missing, but we know there are no survivors." Alaris's eyes snapped to his "You're no," she said softly. A raw desire to comfort him rose in her mind. "She was the woman attempting to barricade the nursery," David said, deep malice burning in his throat. "She died trying to protect children. I am proud of her sacrifice." Alaris saw his eyes shine with a hidden rage and hatred. "I have been tasked to deal an alpha strike before they attack again." "I understand your anger, David, but 1 ship is little proof," Alaris started. "We have evidence showing that there have been 5 attacks before the Aurora Starlight. Moreover, if you close that video, you will find a copy of their creed, and the one after is our investigation of each attack site," David said, knowingly cutting her off. An act that she didn't appreciate, but he needed her to see all the evidence. Alaris had let her growl ring for about a second longer, but switched to the following document and started reading it. Her eyes furrowed at the text before switching to the next one. "Alaris," David said as she finished, "I am not doing this for vengeance or revenge. I am doing it because I wouldn't hesitate." "What are your orders?" she asked, pointedly, a fear of his answer bleeding into her tone. "I am to launch one of the shuttles at their homeworld. It has been modified with an FTL drive," David said, his expression hardened to let her know this isn't negotiable. "I will cut them from their only harbor so that they will have no safe haven." Alaris jumped to her feet with a growl. "That's an extermination!" She pinned him to the wall, her hands gripping tightly to his jacket. But her eyes showed her soul. She was terrified. She had just gotten a piece of comfort from a man who cared for her and her alone. Yet now he would stain his hand and soul with the blood of millions, if not billions. She couldn't let this happen. "Alaris," David said as he gently patted her head, "I know it is a weight that will never be lifted, but I must, not because it's necessary, but because I will protect everyone. I swore to complete my mission." He stroked her hair. "I will bear this weight because it is a weight I can bear. I will kill 1 billion to save a quindecillion. That is the price I will pay. And I will execute my duties without failure, hesitation, or favoritism. So please don't try to stop me." Alaris released him. "Findra David, you realize that would make you a mass murderer and a war criminal." She sucked in a hard breath, the still lingering scent no longer calming. "Why did it have to be you? Why not Hearth or Samantha?" "Because they have families. I don't have anyone," he said, as a thought came back to him. "Except you, my Zandno. I trust that you will protect them and be with me until I reach that point. I promise you that I will not run nor hide from my crime." She watched his eyes reading him. She couldn't stop him. His kind wouldn't shun away from such action. Her people knew that after the war. She had seen it firsthand on 50 different worlds. Human troops fought like Gutvans when cornered to buy precious few seconds for a covering barrage or orbital strike knowing they would die in the flames. They held lines single-handedly so an evacuation shuttle could take off with the wounded and civilians. only for them to be swarmed the second their ammo depleted. They drowned the Jackalow attacks in bloodied quagmires of troops to buy time for her people to run. She could not stop him when the time came, just like how she couldn't stop Kianras from giving his life for her and Kiga. She wasted the time she had with Kianras, but she would not with this one. Not with her Kusafane, not him. He gave back to her an eagerness for a future and place of belonging in his heart. He had held her with tender love and readied care. She would buy every minute she could steal from him and hold them dearly. All she could do is give him reason to pause and hesitate, though she doubted it would slow him. She had seen the mother that had given him to their world, and she saw the same readiness to sacrifice himself for those he wanted to protect, a trait she once thought noble, yet now felt cursed and a plague to her alone. Her hands wrapped around him, pressing as hard as she could, fearful that he might vanish if she let him go. A gesture he returned as her face buried in his chest, and his arms came around and held her with a tender force. "Please don't leave me alone," she said into his chest, tears slipping loose at the thought of him finishing his task and its aftermath. "I want you to stay with me, even for a bit longer." He said nothing, his heart audible only to her ears, a steady pounding in his chest. His hand reached her chin and raised her eyes to his gaze lidded with an apologetic plea for her, his focus shifting to her lips, his desire to be sealed with a kiss, an act she willingly gave.